Bloodborne kinda broke me. Hear me out. It didn't just break me in the screw this boss, this game is hard as hell, I give up kind of way, like it, invariably breaks everyone who has started or rolled credits on Bloodborne. That's part of the whole fun of it. No, it broke me because it completely raised the bar on what a third-person action horror game could be, and I've honestly been chasing that high ever since. That is until I played Liza P, the brand new Souls-like. No, it's not just a Souls-like. Until I played Liza P, the brand new Bloodborne cover album from a relatively unknown South Korean studio called Round 8. Liza P isn't better than Bloodborne, and it never truly reaches the same highs for me, but it comes close enough. And in a world where we tragically still don't have a Bloodborne 2, I will take it. So let's celebrate Bloodborne and its brand new baby brother, Liza P. First though, let's do a quick recap of how we got to the point where a game so openly lifting Bloodborne's whole entire shtick is even worth celebrating to begin with. Liza P isn't the first game to try and give FromSoft a run for their money in the genre FromSoft invented. Far from it, actually. During the 13-year stretch between 2009's Demon's Souls and 2022's Elden Ring, all sorts of other game studios got in on the Soulsborne genre with their own take on things. So much so that we had to create the new term soulslike, a new label for Souls games that were not made by the studio that makes Souls games, FromSoft. Let's go through them. There was The Surge, which was future Souls with robot parts, Neo, which was Samurai Souls, Salt and Sanctuary, side-scrolling Souls, Remnant, which was first-person Souls, we had Star Wars Souls, Souls of the Fallen, Eldest Souls, which literally had Souls in its title, and tons and tons and tons more, like so many more. But none of them were really specifically trying to be like Bloodborne. That's the thing, we've had dozens of Souls-likes, but next to no Born-likes. Liza P is the first game to really try and tap into the specific energy, pacing, and game feel of Bloodborne. Game feel, that weirdly intangible texture or flavor that specific games or franchises have that make them special. Like, you feel it when you jump in Mario, throw an axe in God of War, and dodge roll, run, and attack in Bloodborne. It's different than in Dark Souls, and it's different than in nearly every other Souls-like. People like me really love Bloodborne. Sure, it only sold a couple of million units, and it's landlocked as a console exclusive on the PlayStation 4, playable on PS5 as well, but that hasn't stopped hardcore Bloodborne fans from obsessing over it for years. There's a massive art and cosplay community around it, a fan-made PS1 demake, a fan-made Bloodborne car racing game, and every PlayStation showcase and state of play presentation is preceded by an army of pitchfork-wielding Bloodborne fans like myself demanding a 4K 60 frames per second remaster of the game, to the point that some people just said, F it, and they made it themselves. People love Bloodborne. For reasons we'll never really know, it never got a sequel, spin-off, or spiritual successor, that is, until Liza P launched this year as a love letter to Bloodborne. So what makes Bloodborne and Liza P so similar? Well, for starters, both games feature a character with a gun-like weapon in their left hand and a big-ass, sharp, upgradable weapon in their right hand. They both have you creeping around cobblestone streets where overturned carriages, rotting horse carcasses, and dead bodies litter the once bustling neighborhoods, now overrun with nightmarish approximations of townspeople. They both make you stop off at glowing beacons to save and then warp back to a safe area to level up with the help of an emotionless woman dressed like a weird Victorian doll before heading back out to explore dense forests, creaky workshops, and colossal towers riddled with murderers leaking from the shadows and grotesque hulking bosses ready to pound you to smithereens with cartoonishly large hammers. And both games let you do it all while wearing a big dark trench coat and a weird but lovable animal mask, in case you don't want to see your hunter's eyes, or in Liza P's case, you don't feel like looking at a bootleg Timothy Chalamet for dozens of hours. Who does? I mean, some of you, I guess.
What have you done lately, oh great artiste?
See, Bloodborne had what I like to call the secret sauce, the juice, the blood vials or whatever. It took all of the magic that FromSoft had been working into the Dark Souls and Demon's Souls games and made it quicker, snappier, and more terrifying. And like Bloodborne, Liza P just moves quicker too. Themes and environments aside, Bloodborne and Liza P are simply built around faster traversal and combat. Sure, some of the old school Dark Souls heads missed the heavier, more stoic approach to Souls games, but Bloodborne's reliance on gothic horror themes over evil Playmobil castles totally won me over. Now, since Bloodborne launched in 2015, FromSoft has continued to evolve the Souls genre with games like Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, and Elden Ring, which all up the ante in brilliant ways, and I fucking love them all, but none of them connected with me on the same way that Bloodborne did. Elden Ring came closest with its near infinite options in weapon sets, stats, and playstyles, meaning I could get like damn near close to having my character feel like he plays like a Bloodborne hunter, but its emphasis on open world exploration and fast-paced yak horse travel, whatever Torn is just inherently different than, tiptoeing around the dark and claustrophobic streets of Yharnam, a feeling that Liza P has almost completely recaptured for me. Now, there are some key differences, though, between Liza P and Bloodborne. Liza P doesn't tilt as hard into horror as Bloodborne does, although it does occasionally get close. Instead, it goes with a kind of steampunk theme, which ends up feeling less like Castlevania and Sleepy Hollow and more like BioShock and the City of Lost Children. Liza P largely trades Bloodborne's organic approach to enemies, wolves, spiders, mangled mares, for mechanical ones, opting to more frequently give the player gnashing, chirping robots to tear apart. You do eventually fight some more beast-like enemies, but Liza P's story, influenced almost entirely by the original 1883 The Adventures of Pinocchio book by Carlo Collodi, is one of robot puppet servants revolting against the real people, mostly killing them and then stalking the streets at night. But one of the biggest differences is that Liza P is generally just an easier game than Bloodborne. It's definitely still tough, and there are definitely some big pain in the ass bosses that will beat you down and make you almost throw your controller. But there's nothing in Liza P as tough as Bloodborne's Orphan of Kos or Lawrence the First Vicar. It even got a pretty significant patch that made a bunch of bosses even easier recently, and your weapons even tougher, while simultaneously reducing the weight of the main character's weapons and secondary items, making it easier to go through the game without getting over-encumbered and slowed down by all your stuff. And Bloodborne never really got anything on that level. They made the loading times quicker. Thankfully, because at launch, it was like a minute and a half every time you died, and you died a lot.
Still lingering about.
Additionally, Liza P is smaller in scope. It's a slightly shorter game if you're just sticking to the main story. More importantly, though, it doesn't really have much in the way of optional content, like large-scale secondary areas and bosses that aren't part of the progression through the Golden Path. Bloodborne eventually got the Old Hunters DLC, a massive, awesome expansion that added a bunch of new areas, bosses, and weapons, and I'm really hoping Liza P gets something similar, not because the core game is lacking or anything, far from it really. It took me like 40 hours to roll credits on Liza P. I really took my time with it, and that was with lots of backtracking to grind my stats up and find most of its hidden items and weapons. No, I want more Liza P because I think it's awesome, and it's more likely to get DLC than Bloodborne is to get a remaster, remake, or sequel, although I will never stop asking and praying for those things.
Farewell, good hunter.
But it's not just that Liza P pays a mean tribute to Bloodborne. Liza P actually does some stuff better than Bloodborne. Don't kill me on this one. Bloodborne is kind of light on story and heavy on lore, the stuff in the margins that you kind of need to dig around for to appreciate. Bloodborne's got tons of that. While Liza P puts his story more front and center with a great script and lots of cinematics to bring it all together. Also, and again, hear me out on this before you behead me with a whirligig saw or a threaded cane, I think Liza P has a deeper and more nuanced weapon system. Let's start with your left-handed projectile weapon, known as your Legion Arm, which can be swapped out and upgraded to various effects and perks. I played most of Liza P with an arm weapon called the Puppet String, which works somewhat like Scorpion's Chain from Mortal Kombat, quickly pulling enemies towards you and you towards them once you upgrade it with big, powerful attacks to boot. Bloodborne's left-hand weapons, on the other hand, are, I guess the same hand, are mostly pistols, shotguns, blunderbusses, rifles. They're fun as hell, but they're somewhat limited in terms of how you can tweak and improve them aside from stats. And then there's also your main right-hand weapons in Liza P, and that's where things get really interesting. Liza P technically has fewer weapons than Bloodborne overall, but it does something unique with them. Most of the weapons in Liza P can literally be dismantled into two components, a blade and a handle. So you can then mix and match those components to make new weapons, which can be upgraded on their own, tweaking attack stats and attributes along the way. This basically means that there's kind of like infinite or nearly infinite weapon combinations in Liza P, which leads to some really cool varieties in character performance and playstyle. Now, this ends up working really well in favor of Liza P's emphasis on robot parts and steampunk aesthetics. There's a distinctly toyetic, kit-bashing kind of feel to the weapon system, and it helps Liza P stands on its own, despite so much of the game feeling like a Bloodborne spiritual successor, or like I said before, a cover album. It's the kind of evolution that you would expect FromSoft themselves to implement if we ever got an actual, official Bloodborne sequel, and again, since we haven't yet, I will gladly take it here in Lies of P. So there you have it. After years and years of seemingly dozens of video game developers trying their own take on Dark Souls, we finally have a game that's specifically showing some love to Bloodborne. It's not perfect, and it's not better, but it's doing enough of its own thing that I fell in love with it for what it is, and I think you will too. If you're like me and you love Bloodborne, you want something awesome to play in between setting up your quarterly Bloodborne remaster and Bloodborne 2 summoning circles, we've all been there and I'll be there with you. Definitely check out Lies of P. It's a fantastic start from Round 8 Studio and publisher NeoWiz, and I hope it becomes a franchise for years to come. So, what's your take on Lies of P? Are you playing it? Do you love Bloodborne and the Soulsborne and Souls-like genres in general? Celebrate that stuff in the comments below. And until then, for all things video games, and especially Bloodborne, stick with IGN. Good hunter.